Welcome everyone to this first hot topic briefing for 2026. We're calling it a work group showcase, and I'm Camilla Bullock. I think most of you I met, but it's also some new faces. I'm going to run through this meeting together with Dan, who's going to help you if you have any questions in the chat or just encourage you to engage with us. And also Monica Jasuja is on the line. And I think we have a big payments year ahead of us. Across Asia Pacific, there are three things I think we'll see more of. More speed, both in payments, in regulation, and also how risk emerge. I think second, we will see more fragmentation as we see new rails developing, and in general, all that new technology, regulations, and policy frameworks that are coming into place. Rules and standards and customer expectations. And third, more pressure on trust. So it's more important than ever that we come together to make sense of this and shape that strong voice from APAC payments industry. And that's why we're here today. So we're going to talk about the work that is developing within the Emerging Payments Association Asia and our working group. And I think you can see that on the line today, we don't just have members. We also have invites from across the industry because we think it's really important to make all voices heard when we're shaping up to how we will develop our agenda. So today is going to be interactive. So let's start with, yes, if you please could drop in the chat where you're based. Thank you very much for that. And if we move on to the second slide, and there we're going on with the second slide. Good. You see lots of people from across.
Marion, can you go to the next slide, please?
Are you seeing my slide?
Excellent. Not to worry. I'll just move on and talk about who EPAA is. So if you don't know, we pull members together. We have about 80 members now from across the whole value chain. And what's most important to us is to improve the payments industry and through that enhance lives everywhere. And you will see that when we go through our different topics today, that it's really from the back end to the front end. And if we land on a page that shows us that last year we had a record year in growth, we grew 50% in the membership, and we visited 15 markets, and we hosted more than 100 events. So there is a lot of activity to engage with. And I also want to take this opportunity as the first meeting of the year on the next slide, where we see the new members that came on board during the last 6 months. So welcome to all of you. And if we just go one more slide ahead, so we're going to see what we actually got. Stop there. This is the slide. So if all just can scan that, because I want to see what you think before we go ahead with this. So what's the biggest payments challenge in APAC right now? So I'll give you a little bit of time to answer that. And this is how we use to get the inputs into the working groups also. So you will see this going through the whole meeting today. And if you want to add flavor to what we're talking about, yes, use the chat and we'll also collect that. Good. Fraud, I'm not surprised about that. In cross-border payments, fraud, more fraud. Funny enough, that's the first working group we're going to speak about today. Regulation, scams, regulatory divergence. Excellent, thank you very much. We'll see more words coming in then. So today is really about opening the conversation and capturing what the industry is grappling with, so that we take that in when defining the different agendas. So I'm going to speak a little bit about the process in the working groups, because what we feel is this is the year we really need to make our voice louder, but also sharper. We want to create real outputs from the working groups, and hence we're doing these kickoff meetings, which we've never done before. So we really appreciate that you're here. I think we can take fraud with us away from this one, but we'll capture this and we'll share it afterwards also. So maybe we could just move on. Thank you. So the working groups are really designed to not be panels or what we sometimes refer to talk shops. We really want every working group to come together on a regular basis. Most of them are monthly, some of them are not monthly, and you will know what we're going to talk about. And in each working group, we're going to create one output that we also will share. It will be led by ourselves. So Monica and I are sharing the different working groups, and we'll also have a co-chair supporting us, which is mostly from our ambassador group. We'll speak a little bit more about that in a bit. We also have something we talk about as founding members. So there's organizations that already come to us and are committing more time or sponsorship to actually go to those working groups off the ground. They act as sounding boards through the process, and they're also shaping the direction. But no member will ever own a working group. It's co-owned by the members. So the more you participate, the more say and the more space you get in general. So if we just move on and look a little bit about the process. And this is, again, to really sharpen the output. And what we found across the industry is that we need more alignment and also definitions. We know there is a lot of, I shouldn't say misconceptions, but you're sitting in different areas of the value chain, or you're being a corporate or an SME or a government, and you have different ways of talking about things. So the first section of the working group is all around awareness and alignment, and the products or assets that will come out of this is taxonomy, definition, mythbusters, and in general, small campaigns. Before we're moving on to framing the discussion, what are we going to do this year? What questions are we going to ask? And from what perspective? Very important here also, what are we not doing? Then we're going to co-creation and development. That can be lots of different things. It can be article, toolkits, frameworks, workshops, and so on and so forth. We go into validating. We are now in June, July, and in July is going to be very exciting because we're going to have the first EPA Payments Leaders Forum. It's called EPAA Connect and will take place in Malaysia on the 16th of July. And here we're bringing the working group in to test the material. Some working group might also come from that, and that we'll see in the future. Last, super important for all of us, we amplifying the message. A lot of this happens around Singapore FinTech Festival for us, because that is sort of the pivot, like the grand finale of the year. But we also have a few other strategies how to amplify the messages and the products coming out from the working groups. So with that, let's move on. So working group, the goal is practical impact, shared understanding, common language, tool frameworks and guidance. And those are the working groups and some of the founding members that are already on board. But stretch again, working groups are open for all members. We listen to the full industry. So if you're not a member yet, we still listen to you. But members are the continued dialogue we're having, and with outputs and presenting it forwards. So let's have a look at one working group, and that is what you all gave us inputs on. So next slide, and we have scams and fraud. One of the founding members here is Samsung, and they came on board as we know fraud and scams is evolving faster than anybody can keep up on. And this is also one topic we can't fight it by ourselves. We really have to come together, and it's changing by the day. And Samsung is really on the forefront on this globally, as are many of our other members. But we have Jason with it here today. So I'm going to ask him some questions of what he sees happening in this space. But while I do so, please scan that QR code, and we're also going to ask you a question. So while they are answering, Jason, are you on the line actually? I hope so.
Hi, Camilla. Yes, I'm here.
Perfect, Jason. How are you today?
Team. Good, great.
Excellent. So I mean, it's a bit sad that it is the biggest challenge we have, scams and fraud, and it's most likely not going to go away. But if I turn to you, what is the things most consistent that makes, if we look at scams specifically, so difficult to tackle?
Mm. Yeah, I think one of the so I wanted to state a simple observation that we've seen so sort of this year is that scams and frauds are no longer just a compliance issue. They're really a structural risk in the payments ecosystem. And what we've seen with our data across the industry is a fundamental change to how scams and frauds operate. It's what we call the sophistication shift. So what that means in practice is that the headline fraud rate has been consistent, relatively stable over the past year, but in reality, it's becoming a lot more sophisticated. It's becoming a lot more dangerous. So in 2025, we've seen, sophisticated multi-layered fraud attempts, often involving like AI, synthetic identity, deepfakes, cross-channel abuse, increased by over 180% year on year. So the impact today is really on the sophistication itself. It's not really the risk in volume anymore. And I think what we're seeing, you know, and the scams and fraud is that it's no longer just stopping at the onboarding stage. It's flowing into, it's flowing directly into payment rails, into real-time transfers. And that's why regulators are increasingly looking at frauds and scams, not just as an isolated consumer harm, but it's a source of systemic risk, organized crime, erosion of trust in the digital finance ecosystem.
Yeah, that trust element is so important for us. But what we heard, we had several activities last year, several roundtables. We wrote 2 reports, which one is still to come out from a roundtable in Mumbai, was that we saw a need for defining that scam element specifically. Also, because there was a trend emerging that newly financially included individuals who are scammed are actually falling out of the digital economy. So it has a multiplier in impact. So turning to you, and I also going to ask the audience this question. Or maybe you can speak a little bit about like that scam definition, and for you also scam liability frameworks that goes. Do you find that is important to define for our industry to start to work towards more resilience and mitigation here?
I think of course, because right now fraud is highly coordinated across cross-border, but our defenses are really still, as an industry, our defenses are still really siloed. So the same, scam type, same fraud topology can look very differently depending on the institution or the jurisdiction that it touches. But if the definitions are not aligned, if there's no shared language, then it's just extremely difficult to aggregate the risk and spot patterns that emerge. And so, as first line defense, as incident responders, it's extremely difficult to then identify the signals that matter, like the mule networks, the bad actors, across the entire ecosystem, banks, PSPs, platforms. They have different systems that rarely line up. So having that shared definition, having a shared language is the first step towards better regulation and better policy.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you. Thank you for being on the same page in that. And many of those inputs comes from discussions that you've also been involved in. So audience, what you can expect is that we're doubling down on definitions and comparing liability frameworks, and also start to look a little bit around data sharing and how we can work. I mean, I'm sure it's going to be a little bit of agentic AI conversation in here, because that is an important part also that will come to play. So thank you very much, Jason. And I'm going to hand over to Monica, who's going to bring forward our next working group.
Awesome. Thank you, Camilla. So for everyone who's joined us right now, if you're joining us late, please do scan the QR code that you're seeing on the screen so that we can ask you a few questions on Slido. Now, when it comes to tokenized money, I think most of us who are on the call have asked ourselves this question: why did it become so important and so quickly pervasive in the last year? And this is exactly what we're trying to do now, which is to talk about tokenized money and stable coins and how they are moving away from theory into real world implementation and experimentation across APAC. Now, while the conversation around them is still fragmented, at least in our minds and what we are reading of it, we are seeing very different assumptions, both about risk and regulation. However, the biggest question that we are seeing that comes to us from across all the regions and the countries that we are representing is the real world usefulness of this technology and rail as compared to the previous implementations, and how useful is it to actually not just implement right now, but it also in terms of how it's talking to the current rails. So we are running this tokenized money working group to move this discussion out of the narratives into evidence. Our goal is not advocacy. It's definitely not to talk about what already exists and how this might be helpful or not, but to actually get from discussions into evidence. So we want to talk about how this is going to impact merchants, payment providers, regulators, technology partners, and make informed decisions. Now, Camilla, if I can turn to you, and since we've spoken about this a lot, for the audience, if we could talk about what we have been thinking about tokenized money, what are some of the things that you're hearing? And when you hear about the confusion that is in many of the conversations that we are having, why does EPA think that we want to actually not just start this working group, but also talk about the shared language and real world use cases?
So I think it's the same what we're coming back to very often, that we see the industry start debating outcomes before we have agreed on fundamentals. We're not using the same language. We're not using the same language and terminology around risk. And again, just as I said to Jason, like liability is such an important one to know where we dare to innovate, where us as an industry or like smaller player, bigger player should invest to be right positioned, because there is no debate around that this new technology is useful, especially if we're looking at importer exporters is something that we're going to double click on in the beginning. So I think the intent of this working group is not to tell the industry what to do, but to help make better, more informed decisions where we can ground the conversation in evidence rather than just assumptions. So I think we wanted to call this like why you should care. So really drill home what is the usefulness in tokenized money, and in the beginning, stable coins for merchants, importer, exporters.
So what's very interesting, Camilla, is what we have on the screen right now. Most of the participants who have participated say that the biggest confusion, and this will be so helpful in one of our first discussions that we have on this working group, is, and look how evenly it seems to be distributed in terms of all 5 of these that we have brought up. Now, that is the interesting part. This is exactly why we need this working group to not just help inform, but also help dispel some of the myths associated with the new tech or the existing tech, which is now coming into use cases which are becoming more prevalent. So what I think one of the major key things that we have been focusing on is that it's not incompletely wrong in terms of what we are hearing, but somehow the information is not complete. And when we started off, and like you mentioned, why should we care? Why should merchants care, for example? Why should a bank care? Why should any other financial institution care? Why should the regulators care? The fact of the matter is that they do care. And now when we look at this from more of an APAC perspective and we break this down in terms of how other countries are actually reacting, that's the unpacking that we need for our members. And thank you, audience, for participating in this poll, because what you have just given us is exactly what we'll be working on in our first phase of the working group, which is to talk about some of the myths associated with stablecoins. Are they real? Are they completely unreal? Who do they impact? Do we need to care about these as an industry, or do we need to dispel these fears as an industry as well to make sure that stablecoins, for example, adoption can either be accelerated or that we can have safeguards in place? So this is the kind of discussion that we'll be having in our first phase, and you as an audience have experienced a little bit of that sliver in this session. So with this, thank you so much for participating, and I'll go back to Camilla for the next working group.
Good. Thank you, Monica, and thank you, audience. And you say everything is aligned and attached to each other. I'm sure that tokenized money, stable coins will also come up when we talk about global digital commerce and SME access. This is a working group that's been developed in collaboration with Asia Pacific Financial Forum, which is a think tank for APAC, the Asia Business Council, that's every year write recommendations to the APAC finance ministers. We've been working with APFF for 6 years. And first, this working group was called Open Banking, then it was called Open Finance, then it was called Open Data. And through the years, we developed or coined the expression, trade is good for everyone, but there is no trade without payments, and there is no movement, there is no payments without the movement of data, and that therein lays the challenge. But through that work, we also found like moving data and data access is far away from the only fragmentation in regulation that surrounds trade. And what we also have found is the trade community and the payments community or the financial service community is using very different language. And sometimes there are points and bullets in, for example, free trade agreements that are straightly contradicting what we're doing within, for example, the G20 project. So what we want to do with this project, and what we've already done some roundtables around and wants to continue, is to really see what are the challenges for SMEs. So we're listening to the SMEs out there, we're listening to your customers and say, what stands between you and them for you to enable them to participate in cross-border commerce? This working group is a less frequent one than the others. I think we have 2 or 3 meetings before May, where we're developing a workshop. The workshop will have 3 or 4 panels that the working group members will participate in, and together with other private sector players. The workshop then will form our input to the APAC and the APAC finance ministers. So this is a really important one. And I can see industry principle and guidance. That is definitely how the APAC Council is talking about guidance. And that's what you can put into the APAC finance ministers together with some use cases to make it come alive. So if you're in this space, please lean in and join this working group. And I think with that, we move on to the next one. And meantime, please chat away with them if you have ideas how we can leverage this.
Thank you so much, and welcome, Aslina.
Hi,
you on the
here.
call?
Yes, I am.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So, Aslina is an absolute expert, and we have been working with her. In fact, we had an amazing last work group discussion in person in Singapore. So for those who don't know, the Concord project kicked off, I think, mid last year. And our project's main objective is to actually help lower the cost of cross-border payments by deliberation on some of the low-hanging fruits, which are very high impact, however, are low in terms of effort to implement, so that everybody in the ecosystem, for the good of financial inclusion and, of course, the benefit of reducing the cost of cross-border payments, can actually work together to publish this toolkit that is going to help everyone to understand how these costs can be brought down. Now, this is being done along with our members. And of course, Aslina has been a very active member on that, as well as she sits on the task force. And of course, she's doing groundbreaking work in her company, which is PayNet. So before we jump in, Aslina, let's talk a little bit about how and what your experience was when you worked on this amazing discussion that we had last time. But most importantly, like, what do you see are some of the challenges that you're seeing across the market and stakeholders, and how have we made Project Concord slightly different from past attempts in which you have also been very actively involved?
Okay, so let me break the question into 3 different parts. The first part is around cost. Now, one of the key things that I see as a main challenge whenever we do cross-border payment is actually the FX, right? Any foreign currency exchanges is always a friction there. especially when it comes to illiquid currencies and you want to settle in a local currency of the merchant, right? So that's one part. That means that you will need to kind of like translate 3 times. US dollar is always from US dollar and back to US dollar, and there's a third currency pair, right? So that's the cost element. The second part is around the timing by which payments need to reach one point to the other, right? So basically, that particular thing, the friction is mainly because of the infrastructure challenges. It's because of the standardized, non-standardized way, payment is being processed and remitted from one jurisdiction to the other. And thirdly, it could be also because of regulation, right? Now, the other part is that's also equally important is also to look at, the kind of language that you wanna use, the protocols. ISO 2022, case in point, is also a key challenge. So data consistency also will create kind of like friction. And when it comes to that, the processing for eKYC purposes, all these other checks and balances become slowed down the moment you have all these things coming in, which is why there is a need for standardization, number one, and number two, to make it faster and cheaper, some kind of price transparency around foreign currency. And the third one is around how do you use a standardized format right across, right? So the bigger picture view around this is that the Concord project adds value to all three aspects, because not only does it bring from a payment infrastructure perspective, such as from my side of the world, it also brings into life issues around merchants all over the world. What do they face? And the third element is that how do you bring inclusion into the picture to bring costs down, which is why Moja Loop is leading the project. Yep.
Absolutely. So, Asina, we actually saw that the participants, and thank you everyone for voting in, saw that access to rails and settlement infrastructure is actually the most important and critical opportunity to reduce the cross-border payment costs. Also, and not surprisingly, is regulation and compliance processes. And then comes FX and liquidity management, which is slightly counterintuitive to what we have heard in the working group when we've been involved, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because FX and liquidity management comes as top in terms of how service providers see that as something that they spend the most time and effort on. And
Correct.
this is why these working groups are so important. And thank you for everybody who's polled in. It also gives us a sense of how others see this. And this is what we're trying to dispel in this toolkit. But before, I know we are short of time, so I just actually want to jump into the next question. So, Aslina, from a Project Concord's perspective, and thank you for being instrumental in helping us shape this toolkit and the direction that the working group has taken so far, along with Mojo Loop and Julie. But I want to also give the audience a slight flavor in terms of how you see the various industry approaches towards cross-border payments develop at a system level, and how could these help us in reducing some of these costs? And just a quick preview for everybody who's listening in.
So the thing is, what I see from a jurisdictional perspective, across the world, there's one common theme. The national payment network infrastructure are all internationalizing, right? So that's a key observation, and it's particularly more prominent last year, right? So you see a lot more efforts to bilaterally connect, but for multilateral connection, I think we're all waiting for Nexus to happen. So that's the second part. And then the other bit about it is that as we are connecting bilaterally, the need for having some kind of standardized way of connecting to each other, rather than trying to adapt and adopt, and therefore customization will take time, would create friction in terms of time to market as well as the cost involved, right? So yeah, I think that's quite prominent last year. And then the other bit about it that I wanted to also touch, and because the thing is, your screen here is kind of like staring at me and saying that access to rails and settlement infrastructure. I do agree. Yeah, that inclusion is actually the key to solving a major part of these issues. But at the same time, as with any jurisdiction across the globe, the common issue is that how do we manage and mitigate risk, especially when it comes to unregulated entities in terms of settlement failures and liquidity issues, as well as the EKYC and all the other regulatory, kind of like, hurdles and issues, right? So to me, I would welcome to see more members to hear their perspective, their views, because us as a national payment network infrastructure provider, we are more than happy to work with the smaller fintechs that solves clear pain points and everyday problems, and financial inclusion is our top and utmost priority. So yeah, happy to take the conversation further in Concord.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Aslina, for joining us today and giving everyone a preview of what we do in our working group, and looking forward to our next meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you. Over to you. Back to you, Camilla.
Good. Just going to comment a little bit on the comments in the chat. So even here, it is actually naming definitions and where we come on things. So I see a few comments, is it tokenized money or is it stable coins? And I tell you, we've gone back and forwards on this so many times, and I totally get the difference. But it is, who do we want in the room and where do we start first? So I do think we will very much talk about regulated DLT-based payments. Most likely it is stable coins in the beginning, but questions that we're getting so much from members is also, how do we prepare whoever we are in the ecosystem to be ready for what's coming? Either it is stable coins or tokenized deposits, or how do we upgrade our backend? So I think all the working groups will actually get subgroups down the line. We just really need to get into rhythm to show outputs from it. We need to show that the discussions is, yes, not talk shops where it's interesting and you meet this amazing group of people, but are we actually producing some value for the industry? So thank you for the inputs. We're taking it on. Debating names back and forwards. Quantum safe cryptography. It's been one of our most successful working groups. I'm super proud of how we raised the awareness on this challenging topic globally. And we're really grateful for the members that took the lead on this, which was, among others, KPMG and IBM last year, but also many other members. I want to call out HSBC and A24, IDEMIA, JP Morgan, and many more that came and constantly contributed and had this discussion and learned from each other. But still a lot more work to be done. Coming back to what you call things, the output from this working group last year was a workshop that we named Quantum Safe Cryptography Workshop. We got no signups because it sounded too scary, too technical. And what we talked about was resilience and how to keep payments safe. And I think that is the heart of how we come together as an industry. We really need to define what are we talking about and what perspective are we coming from. So in this working group, we're going to talk about how we can make the migrations to quantum safe cryptography and keep the trust and resilience in the industry. And I have Kyle Harrison with me on the line. Kyle, how are you today?
Yeah, very good, Camilla. Thanks for inviting me back.
Good, yes. I'm going to launch that Slido where we're asking the participants how prepared they are. But in the same time, I want to turn to you and say, how are we progressing in this migration and awareness and helping the industry? And what are the grounds still to be covered?
Yeah, that's a good point. So in terms of how we're progressing, I would say probably pretty slowly. There's been a lot of different timelines that have come out from different governments, but there hasn't been a lot of really stringent, I would say, mandated or regulation in the space to enforce people to move, which I think is a little bit unfortunate, but it also means it's putting a lot of people behind the 8 ball when it comes to actually starting their journey. Because if we're just sitting around and waiting for mandations to come out, it means we're delaying our transition, which means it's also increasing the time at which our different assets or information or data is actually at risk. So I think a lot of people are starting to start their journey. They're becoming more aware of their journey. They might be putting together strategies and roadmaps, but I would say there's not a lot of genuine progress in terms of developing a cryptographic register, performing risk assessments, prioritizing what actually needs to be done, reaching out to vendors, looking at cryptographic agility. There's still a lot of ground that actually needs to be covered, but I think a lot of people are just struggling to actually start.
But I was on a call just this week with a global transaction banker, big global bank, and somebody I know quite well. And he said, "Oh, you did really well in picking up, EPAA did really well in picking up this quantum topic. It's been good for you. But what are you going to do now? We all know it's just a migration." How do you react on that? Just a migration. Is that right? Is it just a migration?
It's a really good point. And I think there's a lot of misconception around what it actually means, because I think, some of the different people I've spoken to at various organizations, they take this perspective of, our vendors will sort it out, it's going to be fine. It's not a big deal. And I think that's a very simplistic view to take. Like, I even heard from somebody, we'll just upgrade TLS. And it's like, that's part of the problem, but it's not the entire scope, right? It's not just a simple migration, but an actual transformation around how you manage encryption within your organization. To date, it's been a very much are we using encryption? Yes, and you kind of move on. But now that those algorithms are at risk, you can no longer just go, we've got it. It's about what do you have? Is it vulnerable? And when and how are you going to change it? But also going forward, what are the mechanisms that you're going to put in place to enable you to rapidly change that encryption on the fly? It's a term that's called cryptographic agility. Because yes, there's been new algorithms released in order to protect against how quantum computers break encryption. There's no guarantee that they're going to be secure in the future. And you can't go through this massive 5 to 10 year process every time the encryption gets broken. So I would say it's not just a simple migration, it's an actual transformation that's going to impact a lot of different facets of every organization.
Yeah, thank you. It's a little bit of mindset, I think. And also, I love that we are a network industry and we're all dependent on each other, but we're never safer than the weakest link also. So just to get everybody on board and not do this by ourselves. So thank you, Carl. And I will be calling you through the year, as I always do.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. We listen to our members, and we have a new working group that Dan has an acronym for already. It's called MAI, Market Intelligence Access. So if we just move the slide here. So really excited about this one. It will not have the set date as the other ones that always will happen on the first Wednesday in the month and so on. This one will go out to all members when they come up. So you sign up and you join. And what it does is to explore Asia payments landscape and market at a time, and giving the members a forum to ask questions around this specific market. And we want to look both in what's happening in the market, how does licensing look like, how does regulations, who are the participants. And every time we go to a member or a friend of us in that market to set the scene and give a presentation for about 10, 15 minutes. And then it's an informal chat among the people on the line. How can we help each other and how can we share that intel? So I'm super excited about this, super excited to learn about the different markets. And how we do this also is we're leaning on our ambassadors. Ambassadors are subject matter experts. They are the only individual members within EPAA, and they help us to understand different aspects of payments in different markets, and they are our brain trust, I guess. I have Mika with me on the line. And Mika, you advise a lot of paytechs across the region. What questions do you think they should ask themselves when they're going to a new market? Is Mika on the line, actually?
Yeah, hi. Hi,
perfect,
Camilla.
Mika.
Hi, everyone. Yeah.
What do you think?
Hi, everyone who's
people ask
joining
themselves?
Yeah, so I mean, to be honest, there's a lot of questions to ask. I mean, when you enter the market, obviously you read the news on different websites and different content sites and so forth. But what I've found is that normally what you read and what you find on the ground is not 100% the same. So there are different nuances that you need to understand. And to be honest, if you have some local presence, it always helps. to understand. Because, like, for example, in the market where I am, in Thailand, been here all my life, uh, what the central banks or the let's say the national switches they say or they publicly have at these events, and then when you go into realities to see that, can you really transact or process, or will these things happen as you wish to connect, fintechs and so forth into the market? It's not exactly the same. And so there are sometimes situations where the incumbents in the market are sort of controlling the scene, not publicly saying as such, but you see it when you try to connect. You see it when you try to engage with them, that it's not totally as they say. They say maybe, okay, we're an open market, but then when you actually try to physically, transact and connect with them, then they say, oh well, let us see, let us consider and stuff like that. And also knowing the right channels, because to be honest, I think in Asia, a lot of business is done through relationships. Uh, Obviously, in Europe and in the let's say in North America, it's similar, but not as much as in Asia. So Asia still is a lot of relationships. Who you know, it's not what you know. And so if you who you know, you're able to connect the dots and then to create value for players in the market.
Yeah, I find sometimes when we've been in new markets for EPA, I've been sitting in rooms and then I've been double checking with my friends or whoever has been in the room that I trust, and just see if my understanding was correct. And often that's what's said, but that's not what they meant. And I think
Yes.
that is something you really need to have your friends on the ground, your partners. If you would say one market that you find is one of the most challenging in our region to understand, which one would it be? So if you voted on the same question here.
No, you put me on the spot there. Hopefully, none of the regulators are in the room right now. They're angry at me at this. No, just I think I mean each country has its challenges. Some countries are more strict due to the regulators wanting to protect the business. Okay, some countries are more strict because they are not really in such an open country. So the regulators are, even they might have some political issues, geopolitical issues. I mean, for example, I was just talking to some contacts in Myanmar yesterday, seeing that if you're allowed to connect cross border, and they said no, the regular doesn't allow that. But whereas in other countries in the region, let's say Nepal, Bhutan, Cambodia, Vietnam, they want to connect because they understand the value of connecting digitally and digital payments, because it brings money into the country for tourism. It supports the SMEs, and if you can connect, digital payments lower to the lower market, not the big market merchants, but the smaller merchants, is actually creating more value to them in that sense. So in some countries, the regulators are still, afraid for this. They view cross-border as a risk, whereas in some countries they're more open now. And also, we're touching about stable coins too. We have just a slight discussion on that in this session. Some countries are viewing it as a tool, whereas some countries are viewing it as a risk. So the regulators are very different. I don't see a consolidated, total view. And so you have to understand in the Asian market, it's more fragmented between the different regulators, even though they have discussions between themselves, but the view of the market is quite different. And the infrastructure, the national infrastructure is also very different in each country.
Yeah. Lots to unpack in those 8 meetings that's coming up. And I'm delighted to see Japan high on the list, because that's the first one that will take place in February. And we have Sam Pemberton, who is the CEO and founder of SmartPay, who will tell us how he built the company and what he sees in the market. So please come to that with really good questions, because we will summarize all the different meetings into a report with 8 markets at the end of the year. So thank you very much, Mika, for coming and chatting to us here today.
Thank you.
And I think we zoomed through the working groups. So here are the dates when they will take place. And I have one more Slido question to you guys, and that is, which one sounds most interesting? then we'll see how well we present to them or not when we see what you're voting.
You have to pick just one.
Oh no, you can pick all if you want to. That's music to my ears, Sonia. So that's just coming in. Good things. And I think Monica has been asking there in the chat also, if you have ideas or things of what you've seen working really well, we're going to use more Miro in the working groups this year, more post-it notes, more voting, like depending on how many comes up. But we really want each session to be you working, not you listening. We listen, you work. That's how we're going to divvy up. And then we work afterwards to create something they can put out from it. Good. Our frauds and scams. I guess this slide correlates to the first ask, what is the biggest challenge our industry have? So thank you for that. We just have one slide to show you what's coming up elsewhere that you can get engaged in. On the 5th of February, we have our Outlook of the Year with the advisory board, and we're also giving the Sage of the Year to the advisory board member from last year who was most correct in their predictions. I know they all home reading up and looking into their crystal balls. And then we have APAC Policy Outlook with Flint Global, who is one of our benefactor member and a well-known policy house. And they are translating the trends that they're seeing and how they impact our industry. Japan FinTech Week, we're going to talk about agentic AI. That's what I alluded to a little bit before. What is authorization and what is the context when something goes wrong? And in March, we will come back to Singapore. So looking forward to those. And if we just go one slide forward, we just show you how to stay connected. That QR code is a really good one to scan. It is not spamming in that WhatsApp group. It is just one way where we drop in what's coming up. We've heard so much good feedback on that it's hard to see the emails coming out. So just use that one. And otherwise, read our newsletter, and there we are. Then we say thank you very much. We'll follow up with an email with some information, and let's make it an exciting payments year.